Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I will be talking about immediately invoked function expression IIFE in JavaScript. First, I will talk about what is an IIFE, and later in this video, I will talk about the benefits of using IIFE in JavaScript. So you make sure you watch this video till end. As you can see in my screen, I am having two files here. One is the index.html, which is having the script of code.js injected in it. And the same file I have opened up in this Chrome in the parallel window. So in the code.js file, we are going to write the JavaScript functions, JavaScript code, and when we refresh it in the parallel window, we can see the output of it. So as you know, in JavaScript, I can write regular functions in two different ways, right? So one is the way I write, let's say, first words, and I get words here and then I log them. So this is the function declaration, and the way I invoke it is I call this, pass the parameter, and then I would have to just refresh the window, parallel window, to see the output. So this is the way we invoke the function declaration. Another way is function expression. So instead of having a function already present in my JavaScript file, what I can do, I can store this function in a variable here, and then I would have to invoke the function by using the variable name. So now one thing to keep a note is I really don't need to have a named function, okay? Although the JavaScript syntax parser doesn't really complain about it, but you would soon see this absolutely works fine. But this name, the moment I have declared it as a function expression, the moment I have written it as a function expression, doesn't have any value. I cannot now invoke this function with its name anymore, right? So if I do so, it will say that first words is not defined anymore. So this treats this as an anonymous function. So this function expression is as good as an anonymous function, right? So now if I can run it, I will see the same hello world. Now, what happens if I get rid of this variable? This anonymous function cannot dangle in my JavaScript file just like that, right? If I happen to just save it and run it again, you would see that it complains that this function statement, it requires a name. The way to go about this is to wrap this function expression, this anonymous function expression, with a fat arrow to avoid the error that comes from the JavaScript syntax parser. Okay, so this is no more existing, so we will get rid of it. So this is my function expression, and the way I invoke it right now, remember there is no name, no variable. So how do I invoke it? I invoke it right next to it. Immediately after I have this function expression in my JavaScript file, I invoke it by giving the parenthesis, the fat parenthesis again. So here I pass the required parameter or parameters, and I should be able to see that this now prints same hello world. So this is an immediately invoked function expression in JavaScript. My function expression is immediately invoked. Okay, so this was about the immediately invoked function expression. Now the obvious question is, why do I need it in JavaScript? The basic reason why do we need this in JavaScript is data privacy. Okay, let's imagine I have a variable here, let's call it prefix, and I gave it Nilanjan says from IIFE. Okay, and this I append it here. So if I just save it, I should say Nilanjan says from IIFE, hello world. Now for demoing the data privacy part, let's add another JS file, and let's have a prefix here, from another. Okay, and this is now going to get stacked, let's say in the index.html, right on top of it. So if I can add it quickly, so here I am stacking up the another JS right on top of the core JS. So whatever I write in this another JS is now going to be part of my global execution context. This global execution context is different from within this function's execution context. Remember, in one of the previous videos, I have talked about execution context in details. If you haven't really gone through it, I will share the link in the description. This is very important to understand the data privacy. Each function inside JavaScript creates its own execution context, a short-lived execution context when it is invoked. The moment that invocation is over, that execution context is over, and all the variables within it, whichever has been created, is also over, until unless it's a closure, of course. If you can see here in the function, here in the immediately invoked function, I have a variable prefix, and since it is within the execution context of this function, the scope of this is defined, or the execution context of this function would hold this prefix. This will not pollute, or this will not collide with anything of the same name in any other execution context, including the global execution context. So here I also have the same prefix. To prove the point, let's print the prefix here. Okay, remember this another JS file is on top of it core. So first this will be executed as a global execution context, and then here all the global execution context, and then the immediately invoked function expression. If I now run it, I would see that this prefix is standing alone. It's totally separated out from the prefix which is being printed out from the function's expression. Now, if I happen to have another variable, let's say here in this global execution context, and I give the same name. So this is from core.js. This is the collision I'm talking about. So here, if in the core.js file I was oblivious, I didn't know that there is another prefix variable I have already declared in another file of my JavaScript project, which is the case here. And now I'm declaring this prefix. And now if I want to log this prefix here, you would see that it takes the changed name, which is from the core.js, no more the from another where we had created the same prefix. So this is the collision of variable. The moment I don't want this collision to happen, I do not really want to pollute the global execution context space, immediately invoked functions, immediately invoked function expressions are my answers, are the solution to avoid this kind of collision and to have the privacy inside it. So to show you the privacy, if I didn't have this here anymore, let's say I do not have this, and in the core.js, now I do not have any prefix in the global execution context. I have one prefix inside the immediately invoked function expression, and I'm trying to call this prefix, trying to access this prefix outside this function execution context in the global execution context, and I get an obvious error saying that prefix is not defined. So this is not available in my global execution context anymore. So nobody can tamper with this prefix, which has been defined intentionally inside this function expression. So this is the major benefit of using immediately invoked function expression. Other two very common or very minute benefits I can say is a bit of minute performance boost with immediately invoked function expression. Why do I say so? Because remember, when I am accessing a prefix variable, the scope chain, right? So when the function is being executed, the moment it hits the line 4, it would first see whether I have this variable inside my function expression here. And then if it doesn't find out, then it goes outside the scope chain and looks into the global execution context or the outer function scope. The moment I have enclosed these variables inside this immediately invoked function expressions, JavaScript engine doesn't have to really go outside this function scope. So it finds it next to where it is being called. So it's a minute performance benefit. We also can see benefits in certain circumstances. Let's say I pass the global execution context here, and I can only name it as G. Okay, I can also pass, let's say, since it's running on the browser, the document object, and I can only pass it to D. So I can, minify the names of this global execution, the global object or the document objects, and then inside this immediately invoked function I can use it. So there is a bit of space I can save them when we minify with any of the libraries like Uglify JS or so. So this saves some amount of space. So immediately invoked function gives you that advantage where you can minify your whole bundle of the JavaScript. So these are the various ways I can reap the benefit from this immediately invoked function expression. Remember, this is all about modular pattern in JavaScript. However, in ECMAScript 6, there is already JavaScript modules. Maybe I will talk about ES6 modules. I will talk about this in detail in some other video. But before that, this used to be, this is still one of the preferred choices when I talk about scope. I don't want to pollute the global execution context. I want to access the global object and the other objects in a shorter form, and also improve the performance minutely. So this was all about, I wanted to talk about immediately invoked function expression. That's what you all wanted to know about it. Hope you have liked this video. If you have liked it, subscribe to my channel and hit a like.